On a crisp autumn evening in Manhattan, Ethan Porter stepped out of his sleek black luxury car, handing the keys to the valet with a casual flick of his wrist. The metallic shine of the car gleamed under the glow of the streetlights, drawing the eyes of passers-by who could only dream of such extravagance. The valet, eager and almost nervous, nodded quickly and murmured, "Enjoy your evening, Mr. Porter." Ethan barely acknowledged him, brushing a speck of lint from his designer jacket as he turned toward the grand entrance of the Gilded Fork, his favorite high-end restaurant. The subtle scent of truffle oil and aged wine lingered in the cool air, mingling with the quiet hum of New York City life. The doorman, dressed impeccably in a tailored uniform, recognized Ethan immediately. With a swift, practiced motion, he opened the glass door and greeted him warmly. "Good evening, Mr. Porter. A pleasure to have you with us again." Ethan offered a faint nod, his lips curling into a self-satisfied smirk. "Of course," he replied, his tone dismissive. Inside, the ambiance was as Ethan expected, luxurious and exclusive. Warm, ambient lighting danced off the crystal chandeliers, illuminating the restaurant's tasteful decor. The room buzzed softly with the muted conversations of well-dressed patrons, a symphony of wealth and privilege. Ethan thrived in this environment, where power and money were the ultimate currencies. The maitre d', an older gentleman named Charles with a distinguished air, approached Ethan promptly. His polished shoes clicked softly against the marble floor as he greeted the regular patron. "Mr. Porter, welcome back. Your usual table is prepared." Ethan gave a small nod, satisfied that his unspoken expectations had been met. "Naturally," he replied. Charles led him toward the corner table Ethan preferred, a spot that offered both privacy and a commanding view of the dining room. As Ethan followed, he glanced around, noting the other patrons with a mix of detachment and silent judgment. It pleased him to see that the clientele tonight was as refined as ever, affluent couples, polished executives, and socialites, all quietly displaying their wealth. When Ethan reached his table, he eased into the plush leather chair, adjusting the cuffs of his custom-tailored suit. A waiter appeared almost instantly, holding a chilled bottle of champagne. "Good evening, Mr. Porter. Shall I pour you a glass of the usual to start?" "Yes, please," Ethan replied, his tone curt but approving. The waiter deftly uncorked the bottle, the soft pop barely audible over the gentle hum of the restaurant. He poured the golden liquid into a crystal flute, the bubbles rising elegantly to the surface. Ethan took a sip and leaned back, savoring the blend of crispness and luxury that mirrored his life. As he surveyed the dining room, Ethan's sense of superiority swelled. This was his domain, a world tailored to his tastes, where he was recognized, respected, and catered to without question. Yet his thoughts were interrupted as the sound of the door opening drew his attention. A family had entered the restaurant, a man, his wife, and their young son. Ethan's brow furrowed slightly as he watched them being greeted by Charles. The man was tall and confident, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit. His wife, poised and graceful, wore an elegant dress, and their son looked wide-eyed with curiosity as he took in the opulent surroundings. Ethan's lips pressed into a thin line. He couldn't help but feel that their presence disrupted the equilibrium of the space. As Charles escorted the family to a table not far from Ethan's, he found himself watching them more closely than he intended. "They don't belong here," Ethan muttered under his breath, his eyes narrowing. He continued to observe as the family settled into their seats, their demeanor calm and assured. The father pulled out the chair for his wife and helped his son adjust his napkin. Ethan's irritation grew. As the evening unfolded, Ethan found himself unable to ignore them. Their soft laughter and animated conversation grated on his nerves. He took another sip of champagne and muttered, "Probably maxing out their credit card just to be here." The bitterness in his tone carried farther than he realized, and a few nearby patrons shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The waiter returned with Ethan's entree, a perfectly cooked filet mignon. But even the tender steak couldn't distract him from his growing disdain for the family's presence. He cut into the meat with unnecessary force, his attention still drawn to the nearby table. Despite his efforts to scrutinize them, Ethan could find no fault in their behavior. They carried themselves with elegance, their conversation marked by genuine warmth and affection. This only deepened his resentment. It frustrated him that they seemed so at ease in a space he considered his own. "They must be here for a special occasion," he muttered, loud enough for his waiter to hear as he returned to refill Ethan's glass. "No way they come to places like this regularly." The waiter hesitated, his professional demeanor faltering for a moment. "Every guest is welcome here, Mr. Porter," he said diplomatically before retreating. Ethan's scowl deepened. He continued to observe the family, searching for something, anything, that would justify his disdain. But they remained poised and composed, as if they truly belonged. It was infuriating. The boy, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, looked up at the sparkling chandelier above their table with awe. "Mommy, look how it shines," he whispered, his voice carrying a note of wonder. His mother smiled and gently ruffled his hair. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Ethan clenched his jaw. Even their moments of tenderness annoyed him. "Trying too hard," he muttered, dismissing them in his mind. But deep down, he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling their presence stirred within him. The evening wore on, and Ethan's irritation reached a boiling point. He noticed the father speaking quietly with their waiter and gesturing toward the wine list. When the waiter brought a bottle of wine to their table, Ethan scoffed audibly. "Bet it's the cheapest one on the menu," he said, not caring if anyone overheard. Across the room, subtle glances of disapproval were beginning to turn toward Ethan. Patrons shifted uncomfortably, some whispering to their companions. A woman at a nearby table leaned toward her husband and murmured, "This is unbearable. Someone should say something." But the family seemed oblivious to the tension. They continued their meal, their laughter and conversation untouched by Ethan's growing hostility. Ethan's simmering contempt finally boiled over when he noticed the father raise a toast to his wife and son. It was a simple, heartfelt gesture, but it was the final straw for Ethan. "Unbelievable," he muttered, shaking his head. Ethan could no longer contain his contempt. He leaned slightly forward in his chair, his voice cutting through the gentle murmur of the dining room. "Some people clearly don't understand the meaning of exclusivity," he said loudly enough for several nearby tables to hear. His words hung in the air, thick with condescension. A few heads turned in his direction, their expressions a mixture of disapproval and discomfort. The family, however, remained focused on one another. The father offered his son a gentle smile and helped him adjust his napkin, as though shielding him from the tension that was beginning to permeate the room. Ethan's frustration grew. How could they remain so composed, so undisturbed by his obvious disdain? He slammed his fork down on his plate, the clatter drawing even more attention. "They probably don't even know how to use the silverware," he said, his tone dripping with mockery. The couple at the table closest to him exchanged uneasy glances. The man leaned in, whispering something to his companion. A woman 2 tables over shot Ethan a sharp look, clearly offended by his behavior. Still, the family seemed unfazed. The mother leaned in to whisper something to her son, who giggled quietly before returning to his meal. The father raised his glass, clinking it gently against hers in a small, private toast. Ethan felt his blood boil. He was used to commanding respect and deference wherever he went, but this family's calm confidence seemed to defy his unspoken rules of the restaurant. To him, they were trespassers, and their refusal to react to his hostility only heightened his frustration. He drained the last of his champagne and waved the waiter over with an impatient gesture. "Another glass," he ordered, his tone curt. The waiter nodded, but hesitated. His normally professional demeanor was tinged with discomfort. "Right away, Mr. Porter," he said before hurrying off. As Ethan's gaze returned to the family, he noticed the father speaking quietly to the waiter, who then disappeared toward the kitchen. Moments later, the father rose from the table, excused himself briefly, and walked toward the back of the restaurant. Ethan seized the opportunity. "Finally," he muttered. "Maybe now this place can return to normal." but his words were met with silence from the surrounding tables. The usual hum of conversation had quieted, replaced by an air of unease. It was clear to everyone that Ethan's behavior had crossed a line, but no one dared to confront him directly. When the father returned, he carried himself with the same poise and dignity as before. He smiled warmly at his wife and son as he resumed his seat. Ethan couldn't help but sneer. "Probably went to beg for the check to be split into installments," he muttered under his breath. A waiter approached Ethan's table, carrying a small silver tray. On it was a neatly folded piece of paper. "Your bill, Mr. Porter," the waiter said, placing it carefully in front of him. Ethan frowned. He hadn't requested the check yet. "I didn't ask for this," he said sharply, but the waiter simply nodded and stepped away. Curious, Ethan reached for the note. His manicured fingers unfolded the paper, revealing a handwritten message in elegant script. As he read the words, his smug expression faltered, his face paled, and his hands began to tremble slightly. The note was simple, yet profound. "Mr. Porter, we appreciate your continued patronage. Please know that the family you have criticized tonight owns this establishment. They are not only our most respected patrons, but the kind-hearted individuals who have made this restaurant a success. Your behavior has not gone unnoticed." The note was signed simply, "The Gilded Fork Team." Ethan read the note again, his chest tightening with each word. His once smooth confidence crumbled as the weight of his actions bore down on him. He had spent the entire evening mocking and belittling the very people who had created the sanctuary he so cherished. He glanced around the room, suddenly hyper-aware of the disapproving stares from other diners. His face flushed with embarrassment, and he felt an unfamiliar knot of shame form in his stomach. The father caught his eye then, his expression calm but knowing. There was no malice, no satisfaction in his gaze, only a quiet dignity that made Ethan's humiliation all the more profound. Ethan placed the note back on the tray, his hands shaking. For the first time in years, he felt small and exposed, stripped of the armor his wealth and status had always provided. Ethan sat frozen, his breath shallow and uneven. The noise of the dining room seemed to fade into a distant hum, replaced by the pounding of his own heartbeat. He clenched and unclenched his fists under the table, struggling to process the revelation. The family, the very people he had mocked, judged, and deemed unworthy, were not only more accomplished than he had presumed, but they embodied the values he had always claimed to admire: resilience, hard work, and humility. He glanced back at the father, who was now calmly pouring a glass of water for his son. The man's every action radiated grace, as if he were completely unbothered by Ethan's earlier cruelty. The mother smiled as she listened to her child speak, her composure unwavering. Ethan swallowed hard, his throat dry. The realization that he had been so wrong, so blatantly and publicly cruel, hit him like a tidal wave. His carefully curated image of superiority and refinement shattered in an instant. He looked down at his plate, unable to meet anyone's gaze. The perfectly seared steak, once a symbol of his affluence, now felt like a weight on his conscience. He pushed it aside, suddenly nauseated. The waiter returned, standing silently by Ethan's table. "Is everything all right, Mr. Porter?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. Ethan couldn't bring himself to respond. Instead, he nodded curtly and gestured for the waiter to leave. For the first time in years, Ethan felt completely out of control. His usual armor, his wealth, his arrogance, offered no protection against the deep sense of shame engulfing him. As the family continued their meal, Ethan's mind raced. He couldn't undo what he had said, couldn't erase the contempt he had displayed. The memory of his cruel words replayed in his mind, each one cutting deeper than the last. He reached for his glass of water, his hands trembling. As he lifted it to his lips, he caught his reflection in the polished silverware on the table. The face staring back at him was unfamiliar. Flushed, ashamed, and vulnerable. Ethan closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He knew he couldn't simply leave, couldn't retreat to his comfortable life and pretend this night hadn't happened. The weight of his actions demanded more than that. Summoning what little courage he had left, Ethan stood. The room seemed to grow quieter as he pushed his chair back and began walking toward the family's table. Each step felt heavier than the last, the stares of the other diners burning into his back. When he reached their table, the father looked up, his expression calm but curious. The mother turned to face Ethan, her brow slightly furrowed. The boy, sensing the tension, leaned closer to his mother. Ethan cleared his throat, his voice unsteady. "Excuse me," he began, his words barely audible. I owe you an apology." The father's eyes softened, but he said nothing, waiting for Ethan to continue. Ethan's hands fidgeted at his sides as he struggled to find the right words. "I was wrong," he admitted, his voice cracking. "I made assumptions about you and your family that were unfair and unkind. My behavior tonight was inexcusable, and I deeply regret it." The mother's expression remained unreadable, but the father nodded slightly, encouraging Ethan to go on. "I've always thought of myself as someone who values hard work and success," Ethan continued, his voice trembling. "But tonight I showed none of that. Instead, I was judgmental, cruel, and arrogant. For that, I am truly sorry." There was a long pause as the family exchanged glances. The father finally spoke, his voice steady and measured. "Thank you for your apology," he said. "It takes courage to admit when you're wrong." Ethan nodded, relief washing over him, but the father wasn't finished. "Let me ask you something, Mr. Porter," the man said, his tone thoughtful. "What will you do with this moment? Apologies are important, but what really matters is what you learn and how you choose to act moving forward." Ethan felt his chest tighten. The question cut straight to the heart of his discomfort. For years, he had defined himself by his wealth and status, believing they made him untouchable. But now, faced with the consequences of his actions, he realized how shallow that identity truly was. "I don't know," Ethan admitted quietly. "But I want to change. I want to be better." The father studied him for a moment before extending his hand. "Then start here," he said. "It's never too late to learn." Ethan hesitated, then reached out and shook the man's hand. The simple gesture felt like a turning point, a small but significant step toward redemption. As he walked back to his table, Ethan felt a mixture of relief and determination. He knew the road ahead would not be easy, but for the first time in years, he felt a sense of purpose. The meal that had begun with contempt and arrogance ended with humility and a desire for change. Ethan left the restaurant that night not as the man he had been, but as the man he hoped to become. Ethan walked out of the restaurant into the cool night air, his thoughts spinning. The weight of his actions and the father's question stayed with him. What will you do with this moment? It echoed in his mind as he stepped into his sleek car, but for once, the luxury didn't bring comfort. Instead, it felt hollow, a reflection of the empty values he had clung to for so long. The drive home was quiet. Ethan's hands gripped the wheel tightly, his eyes staring straight ahead. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about his next business deal, the next networking event, or the next extravagant purchase. Instead, he was thinking about the Harrison family, their grace, their strength, and the lesson they had just taught him. When he arrived at his sprawling home, Ethan didn't feel the usual satisfaction of returning to his palace of wealth. The grand foyer, the marble floors, and the carefully curated art all felt lifeless. He paused in the doorway, looking around as if seeing his home for the first time. He wandered into his study and sank into the leather chair by his massive desk. On the surface lay papers, contracts, and invoices, evidence of the life he had built. Yet none of it felt important now. He reached for a notepad and a pen, something he hadn't done in years. Ethan began writing, though he wasn't sure where to start. His first words were tentative, shaky. "I met someone today who made me question everything I thought I knew. I was wrong, about them, about myself, and about what truly matters." As the words flowed, Ethan poured out his thoughts, his shame, and his determination to change. He wrote about the assumptions he had made, and how they had blinded him to the humanity of others. For the first time, he acknowledged the emptiness of his life, the shallow pursuit of wealth and status, and the pain he had caused along the way. When he finally put down the pen, Ethan leaned back in his chair, exhausted but strangely lighter. The act of writing had cleared his mind and solidified his resolve. The next morning, Ethan rose early, a rare occurrence. He dressed simply, foregoing the tailored suits and expensive watches that had once defined him. He grabbed his phone and searched for information about the Harrison family and their work. It didn't take long to find what he was looking for. The Harrisons were not only successful entrepreneurs but also prominent philanthropists. They had founded multiple programs to support underprivileged communities, focusing on education, job training, and community building. Ethan's chest tightened as he scrolled through articles and interviews. He saw pictures of the family at charity events, surrounded by smiling children and grateful families. In every photo, they radiated warmth and sincerity. He found the website for their foundation and clicked on the Contact Us page. For a moment, he hesitated, his finger hovering over the keyboard. What could he possibly say to them? How could he make up for his behavior? Finally, he typed a message. Dear Mr. Harrison, I want to thank you for your grace and understanding last night. I acted shamefully, and your response showed me the kind of person I aspire to be. I was deeply moved by what I've learned about your work, and I would be honored to contribute in any way I can. Sincerely, Ethan Porter. He hit send before he could second-guess himself. Over the next few days, Ethan felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety. He threw himself into researching the foundation's work, reading about their initiatives and watching videos of their community projects. Each story deepened his admiration and reinforced his commitment to change. 3 days later, Ethan received a reply. It was short, but kind. Mr. Porter, thank you for your message. We appreciate your willingness to reflect and take action. If you're serious about contributing, we'd be happy to discuss how you can get involved. Best regards, Michael Harrison. Ethan felt a flicker of hope as he read the message. It wasn't forgiveness outright, but it was an opportunity, a chance to prove that he was serious about changing. He responded immediately, setting up a meeting with Michael at the foundation's office. When the day arrived, Ethan dressed simply again, resisting the urge to hide behind his usual trappings of wealth. He wanted to show Michael that he was sincere. The foundation's office was modest but welcoming, filled with photos of smiling families and colorful artwork created by children in their programs. Ethan felt a wave of nervousness as he walked inside, but he took a deep breath and pushed forward. Michael greeted him with a firm handshake and a polite smile. Mr. Porter, he said, thank you for coming. Please call me Ethan, he replied, his voice earnest, and thank you for giving me this chance. Michael gestured for Ethan to sit. Let's talk about what you're hoping to contribute. We believe in second chances, Ethan, but change is about action, not just words. I understand, Ethan said, his voice steady. I want to learn from you. I want to help, not just with money, but with my time and effort. I know I have a lot to prove, and I'm ready to start. Michael studied him for a moment, then nodded. All right, let's see what you're made of. From that day forward, Ethan threw himself into the foundation's work. He attended meetings, volunteered at events, and spent hours listening to the stories of the people the foundation served. Each interaction humbled him and opened his eyes to the struggles and resilience of those he had once dismissed. As the weeks turned into months, Ethan began to change in ways he hadn't thought possible. His priorities shifted, his perspective broadened, and his heart softened. Ethan's journey into philanthropy became a profound transformation, one that not only reshaped his outlook on life, but also redefined his sense of purpose. The more time he spent working with the Harrison family and their foundation, the more he realized how narrow his world had been. One evening, after a particularly moving event at a youth center funded by the foundation, Ethan lingered behind to help clean up. The center's walls were adorned with vibrant murals painted by the children who attended programs there. As Ethan gathered chairs and swept the floor, he couldn't help but feel a deep sense of fulfillment, something he had never experienced in his previous life of luxury. Michael Harrison noticed him working and approached with a warm smile. "You've been putting in a lot of hours here, Ethan. We appreciate it." Ethan set down the broom and looked at Michael earnestly. "I should be thanking you. This work has given me more than I could have imagined. It's not just about helping others, it's about finding meaning in my own life." Michael nodded thoughtfully. "That's the beauty of giving back. It's transformative for everyone involved, but it's not always easy. Are you prepared for the challenges ahead?" "I am," Ethan replied without hesitation. "Whatever it takes, I want to be part of this." Over the next few months, Ethan's commitment deepened. He used his business acumen to help the foundation streamline operations and secure new funding. His reputation as a once-aloof millionaire began to shift as word spread about his hands-on involvement and genuine passion for the cause. At a community meeting one evening, Ethan stood before a diverse group of volunteers and beneficiaries. He shared his story, opening up about his past mistakes and the lessons he had learned. His voice wavered with emotion as he spoke about the moment that changed everything, the night he met the Harrison family. "I thought I had everything," Ethan admitted, "but I was blind to what truly matters. That night, I saw grace, strength, and humility in the face of my own arrogance. It forced me to confront the man I was, and to strive to become someone better. I'm here today because of that family, and because of all of you who inspire me every day." The room erupted in applause, not just for Ethan's words, but for the sincerity behind them. Among the crowd was a young man named Terrence, a recent participant in the Foundation's job training program. After the meeting, Terrence approached Ethan with a mixture of gratitude and curiosity. "Mr. Porter," he said, "your story really hit home for me. I used to think people like you couldn't understand what it's like for people like me, but hearing you tonight, it gives me hope." Ethan placed a reassuring hand on Terrence's shoulder. "Please call me Ethan, and thank you. Your strength inspires me. Let me know if there's ever anything I can do to help you on your journey." Terrence smiled, and the two continued talking, forging a connection that would grow in the months to come. As Ethan's involvement with the foundation expanded, so did his personal growth. He became a mentor to several young people like Terrence, sharing his time and insights to help them navigate their own challenges. Each success story, whether it was a single mother finding stable housing or a teenager earning a scholarship, filled Ethan with a sense of pride and purpose he had never known. But the transformation wasn't without its trials. Ethan faced skepticism from those who knew his past. Some accused him of seeking redemption for selfish reasons, while others doubted the sincerity of his change. One particularly sharp encounter came at a high-profile fundraising event. An old business associate, Gregory West, confronted Ethan with a smirk. "So this is the new you, huh? The saintly philanthropist? Forgive me if I'm not convinced." Ethan met Gregory's gaze calmly. "You don't have to be convinced. Actions speak louder than words, and I plan to keep showing through my work that I've changed." Gregory's expression softened slightly, though he still seemed unconvinced. "Well, I'll be watching. Let's see if this isn't just a phase." Ethan accepted the challenge silently, knowing that his journey was about consistency and humility, not proving himself to skeptics. As time went on, the results of Ethan's dedication became impossible to ignore. The foundation expanded its reach, launching new programs and initiatives that touched countless lives. Ethan's efforts helped secure partnerships with other organizations, amplifying their impact even further. 1 year after that fateful night at the restaurant, the Harrison Foundation hosted its largest event yet, a gala celebrating their accomplishments and honoring the individuals and communities they had served. Ethan stood on stage with Michael and Sarah Harrison, addressing a packed room of supporters, volunteers, and beneficiaries. His voice was steady and confident as he reflected on the journey that had brought them all together. "This foundation is proof of what we can achieve when we come together with compassion and a shared purpose," Ethan said. It's not about one person or one family. It's about all of us. Every act of kindness, every moment of understanding makes a difference. And I am humbled to be a part of it." As the crowd applauded, Ethan looked out into the audience. He saw Terrence, now employed and thriving, sitting beside his family. He saw the young mother who had found stability, beaming with pride as her children played nearby. And he saw the Harrisons, their smiles reflecting the impact of their work. In that moment, Ethan felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just for the second chance he had been given, but for the opportunity to pay it forward. As the gala came to a close, Ethan found himself reflecting on how far he had come. The room was now filled with laughter and soft music as guests mingled and celebrated the Foundation's achievements. Ethan, however, stepped outside for a moment of solitude. The night air was crisp and refreshing, carrying the faint hum of the city beyond. Ethan leaned against a marble railing, gazing at the stars. The memories of his life before his transformation flashed through his mind. He thought of the arrogance, the self-importance, and the emptiness he had once felt despite all his wealth. He didn't hear Michael Harrison approach until the man was standing beside him. "Big night, huh?" Michael said, his tone warm. Ethan smiled and nodded. "It is, but it's not really about tonight, is it? It's about everything leading up to this moment, and what we do next." Michael chuckled. "You're starting to sound like a true philanthropist." Ethan turned to face him. "That's because I've had the best teachers. You, Sarah, your son, you didn't just teach me how to give back. You showed me what it means to live with purpose." Michael placed a reassuring hand on Ethan's shoulder. "And you've shown us that people can change. That's not something everyone can say." Ethan hesitated, his voice quiet when he finally spoke. "Do you think I've done enough to make up for the man I was?" Michael's expression grew thoughtful. "It's not about keeping score, Ethan. Redemption isn't a transaction, it's a journey. You've done so much good already. But the real question is, will you keep going?" "I will," Ethan said with conviction. Michael smiled. "Then that's all that matters." They stood in silence for a while, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. Finally, Michael broke the quiet. "There's someone who wants to talk to you inside. I think you'll want to hear what they have to say." Curious, Ethan followed Michael back into the event hall. Amid the crowd, he spotted Terrence walking toward him with a young woman at his side. Terrence's face lit up as he approached. "Mr. Porter," Terrence began, "I wanted you to meet my sister, Brianna. She's the reason I joined the Foundation's program in the first place. I wanted to set a better example for her." Brianna extended her hand shyly. "It's an honor to meet you, Mr. Porter. Terrence talks about you all the time. I just wanted to thank you for believing in him when others didn't." Ethan shook her hand, his heart swelling with gratitude. "The honor is mine. Your brother's determination inspires me every day. He's proof of what we can accomplish when we support each other." Terrence grinned. "I don't think I'd be where I am today if it weren't for you, sir. I've been thinking about how I can pay it forward, how I can help others the way you helped me." Ethan felt a lump in his throat. "That's the best thing you can do, Terrence. Keep the cycle of kindness going. That's how we change the world. One act at a time." As the night wound down, Ethan made his way through the crowd saying goodbye to guests and volunteers. Each interaction reminded him of the community they had built, a community grounded in compassion and hope. When he finally left the gala, the city felt different, as if it were alive with possibilities. Ethan climbed into his car, but instead of heading home, he drove to one of the Foundation's shelters. The building was quiet, most of its residents already asleep. Ethan walked through the halls, taking in the small yet meaningful details: the cozy beds, the stocked pantry, the bulletin board covered in thank you notes. In the common room, a single light was on, illuminating a framed photo on the wall. It was a group picture of the Foundation's team, taken during a recent volunteer day. Ethan spotted himself in the back row, smiling genuinely, a far cry from the man he had been a year ago. He stood there for a long moment, reflecting on the life he had built and the lives he had touched, and for the first time, he felt at peace. Not because of his wealth or status, but because he had finally found his place in the world. Ethan lingered in the quiet shelter, the hum of a distant heating system the only sound. The picture on the wall seemed to glow softly under the dim light, drawing his gaze back repeatedly. He felt a sense of pride, not the hollow kind he had once sought from accolades or wealth, but a deep and fulfilling satisfaction born from genuine purpose. A faint noise broke his thoughts, a soft shuffle of footsteps. Turning, he saw an older man step into the room. His face was weathered, but his eyes held a glimmer of warmth and resilience. "Didn't mean to startle you," the man said, his voice low but steady. Ethan smiled and shook his head. "Not at all. I was just thinking." The man nodded and gestured toward the chairs by the window. "Mind some company? This is my favorite spot to sit and think, too." Ethan gestured for him to join. "Please, I'd love that." They sat in silence for a few moments, gazing out at the city lights. Finally, the man spoke. "Name's Henry. Been staying here a few weeks now. Lost my apartment after I couldn't keep up with the rent. It's been tough, but this place, it's kept me going. I don't know what I'd do without it." Ethan's chest tightened. "I'm glad you're here, Henry. That's exactly why we wanted this place to exist, so no one has to go through tough times alone." Henry tilted his head, studying Ethan. "You're one of the folks running this place, aren't you? I've heard your name around. Ethan Porter, right?" Ethan nodded, a touch of humility in his smile. "That's right. But I'm just one part of it. This foundation exists because of so many people working together." Henry leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "You know, it's not every day you meet someone who could be sitting in a mansion but chooses to spend their time here." Ethan let out a quiet laugh. "A year ago, that mansion would have been exactly where I was. But life has a way of showing you what really matters." Henry nodded knowingly. "Isn't that the truth? What made you see it?" Ethan hesitated, then spoke with honesty. "I used to think wealth and power were everything. But then I realized how empty all of it was. It took meeting people like the Harrisons, people with true compassion and strength, to show me a better way. They gave me a chance to change, and I took it." Henry gave him a long, appraising look. "Not everyone would have taken that chance. That says something about you." Ethan felt a lump in his throat. "I'm just trying to do right by the people who believed in me. And now I want to believe in others the same way." The two men talked for hours, sharing stories of hardship, hope, and redemption. By the time Ethan left the shelter, the sky was starting to lighten with the first hints of dawn. Driving home, Ethan felt a renewed sense of determination. There was still so much work to be done, but he was ready for it. Every life they touched, every barrier they broke down, it all mattered. When he arrived home, Ethan sat at his desk and began drafting plans for the foundation's next steps. He thought about Henry, about Terrence and Brianna, and all the others who had found hope through their efforts. These were the people who fueled his purpose, who reminded him why he had chosen this path. In the weeks that followed, Ethan threw himself into new initiatives. He worked closely with Michael and Sarah, expanding their programs and forging new partnerships. The foundation grew, touching more lives than ever before. Ethan became a familiar figure in the community, not as a wealthy businessman, but as a compassionate leader. People sought him out for advice, guidance, and support. And each time he listened with genuine care, knowing how much it had meant when someone had done the same for him. One evening, as Ethan prepared for another gala, he paused to look in the mirror. The reflection staring back at him was different from the man he had once been. His posture was relaxed, his expression open. He no longer saw a man chasing status. He saw a man who had found his purpose. The journey wasn't over, and Ethan knew it never would be. But he was ready to face whatever came next, knowing he was no longer walking the path alone. Ethan's transformation marked not only a personal journey, but also the beginning of a ripple effect within the broader community. His sincerity and commitment inspired others to rethink their own lives and how they could contribute to the well-being of those around them. Months after the shelter conversation with Henry, Ethan sat in a bustling cafe, poring over the latest proposal for a citywide mentorship program. It was an ambitious plan, one that aimed to pair successful professionals with individuals struggling to find their footing, people like Henry or the many others Ethan had encountered through the foundation. A soft knock on the cafe table pulled him out of his thoughts. He looked up to see a young woman, no older than 25, holding a notepad. "Mr. Porter?" she asked hesitantly. "Yes, that's me," Ethan replied, offering a warm smile. "I'm so sorry to interrupt," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "But I wanted to thank you. I'm Sarah Owens. I attended one of the Foundation's job training workshops a few months ago. Because of it, I was able to secure a position in graphic design, and my life has completely changed." Ethan's smile widened, and he gestured to the seat across from him. "Please, sit down, Sarah. I'd love to hear more about your journey." As Sarah recounted her story, Ethan felt a swell of pride and gratitude. She described how, before the Foundation's support, she had been juggling part-time jobs and caring for her younger siblings after their parents had passed away. The workshop had provided her not just with skills, but also with hope and a sense of direction. "And now," Sarah finished, her voice bright with excitement, "I'm able to help my siblings pursue their dreams too. My little brother wants to study engineering, and I can finally afford to save for his college fund." Ethan nodded, his heart full. "That's incredible, Sarah. You've taken what you've learned and turned it into something amazing, not just for yourself but for your family. You're the kind of success story that keeps us going." Sarah reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. "I don't have much, but I wanted to give back to the Foundation. It's not just money, it's my commitment to volunteer whenever you need help. I want to be part of this movement." Ethan took the envelope with gentle hands, his eyes brimming with appreciation. "Your support in any form is more valuable than you know, and we'd be honored to have you volunteer. Your story will inspire so many others." As Sarah left, Ethan realized the profound impact the Foundation had on individual lives. But there was still more to be done, and his mind buzzed with ideas. Later that evening, Ethan called Michael and Sarah Harrison to discuss an even broader initiative. "I've been thinking," Ethan began, "about how we can create a legacy, something that ensures this work continues long after we're gone." Michael's deep voice crackled through the phone. "What do you have in mind?" "A leadership academy," Ethan replied, his tone filled with determination. "We'll train the next generation of changemakers, community leaders, advocates, and philanthropists. It'll be a place where they can learn not just skills, but empathy and the importance of building others up." There was a pause, then Sarah's voice chimed in, excitement evident. "That's a brilliant idea, Ethan. It would cement the Foundation's mission for decades to come." They spent hours brainstorming, sketching out ideas for the academy. Over the following months, the plan began to take shape. Local schools, colleges, and businesses partnered with the Foundation to provide resources and expertise. The grand opening of the Harrison Leadership Academy was a community-wide celebration. People from all walks of life gathered to witness the beginning of a new chapter in the Foundation's history. Ethan stood on stage alongside Michael and Sarah, looking out at the eager faces of the Academy's first cohort. Each one of them represented potential, a chance to create a brighter future for their communities. As Ethan delivered his speech, his voice carried not just words, but the weight of his journey. "A year ago, I couldn't have imagined standing here today. I thought I understood what success meant, but I was wrong. True success is measured by the lives we touch, the kindness we show, and the communities we build together." The crowd erupted in applause, and Ethan's heart swelled with gratitude. In the weeks that followed, the Academy became a hub of activity. Ethan spent countless hours mentoring students, sharing the lessons he had learned about humility, resilience, and the power of second chances. One day, while reviewing applications for the next cohort, Ethan received a letter from Henry. It was written in shaky but determined handwriting. "Ethan, I wanted you to know that I've found a place of my own again, thanks to the help I received at the shelter and from the foundation. More importantly, I've started volunteering there to give back. Meeting you that night changed my life. I finally feel like I have a purpose again. Thank you for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself. Sincerely, Henry. Ethan folded the letter carefully, placing it in a drawer filled with similar notes. Each one was a reminder of why he had chosen this path, a testament to the lives that had been changed. As the academy grew and the foundation's reach expanded, Ethan remained at its heart. A leader who had once been lost but had found his way by lifting others, and so the ripple effect continued, spreading hope, compassion, and transformation far beyond anything Ethan had ever imagined. Ethan's role within the foundation continued to evolve, and with every passing month he discovered new ways to make an impact. The Leadership Academy was thriving, producing graduates who went on to initiate transformative projects in their own communities. Stories of success and resilience filtered back to Ethan, each one filling him with a renewed sense of purpose. One spring afternoon, as he walked through the bustling halls of the academy, he was approached by a young man named David. David was one of the academy's most promising students, a quiet but fiercely determined individual who had faced significant challenges growing up. "Mr. Porter," David began, holding a binder filled with notes and ideas. "Do you have a moment?" Ethan smiled warmly. "Of course, David. What's on your mind?" David hesitated, then opened the binder to reveal a detailed proposal. "I've been thinking about how we can bring the foundation's principles to schools. Many kids grow up without mentors or a sense of direction. What if we created a mentorship program that connects academy graduates with high school students?" Ethan's eyes lit up as he scanned the proposal. "This is brilliant, David. It's exactly the kind of forward-thinking initiative we need. Let's workshop it together and see how we can bring it to life." Over the following weeks, Ethan and David worked side by side to develop the mentorship program, which they called Bridges of Hope. They reached out to local schools, secured funding, and recruited volunteers. The launch of Bridges of Hope was met with overwhelming enthusiasm. High school students who had been struggling academically or emotionally were paired with academy graduates who acted as mentors, guiding them toward brighter futures. One of these students was a 16-year-old girl named Mia. Quiet and withdrawn, Mia had been on the verge of dropping out of school when she was introduced to her mentor, a young woman named Clara. Clara, a graduate of the academy, saw herself in Mia and worked tirelessly to help her rediscover her confidence. Months later, Mia delivered a heartfelt speech at a foundation event, recounting how Bridges of Hope had changed her life. "I used to feel invisible," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I didn't think anyone cared about me or believed I could succeed. But Clara showed me that I mattered, that my dreams mattered. Because of her, I'm not just staying in school. I'm planning to go to college." The audience erupted in applause, and Ethan watched from the sidelines, his heart swelling with pride. Bridges of Hope became one of the Foundation's flagship programs, and its success inspired Ethan to explore other avenues for expansion. He began traveling to nearby cities, sharing the Foundation's model, and encouraging local leaders to adopt similar initiatives. During one such trip, Ethan visited a struggling town that had been hit hard by economic downturns. The streets were lined with shuttered businesses, and the air was thick with a sense of hopelessness. Ethan met with a group of community leaders and proposed a partnership. "We can't change everything overnight," he admitted, "but together, we can lay the groundwork for a better future. Let's start with a skills training center, where people can learn trades and find new opportunities." The leaders were initially skeptical, but Ethan's passion and track record won them over. With support from the foundation, the town's first skills training center opened 6 months later. It offered courses in fields like construction, healthcare, and technology, giving residents the tools they needed to rebuild their lives. One graduate of the center, a single father named Luis, shared his story at its 1-year anniversary celebration. "I thought I had hit rock bottom when I lost my job," Luis said, holding his young daughter in his arms. "But this center gave me a second chance. I'm now a certified electrician, and I can provide for my family again. For the first time in years, I feel hopeful." As Ethan listened to Luis's speech, he couldn't help but reflect on his own journey. He had once believed that wealth and power were the ultimate measures of success, but he now understood that true fulfillment came from empowering others. Back in his office at the foundation, Ethan began drafting plans for the future. He envisioned a network of centers, each tailored to the unique needs of its community. The work was daunting, but he was undeterred. One evening, as he reviewed his notes, he received a call from Michael Harrison. "Ethan," Michael said warmly, "I've been hearing incredible things about the work you're doing. Sarah and I couldn't be prouder of how far you've come." Ethan felt a lump rise in his throat. "Thank you, Michael. None of this would have been possible without your family's guidance and support. You changed my life, and I'm just trying to pay it forward." Michael chuckled. "Well, you're doing a remarkable job. And remember, you're not alone in this. We're with you every step of the way." As the call ended, Ethan sat back in his chair, a sense of gratitude washing over him. He knew that the road ahead would be challenging, but he was ready to face it. Ethan's transformation had not only reshaped his own life, but it also set in motion a movement of compassion and change. And as he looked out at the city skyline, he felt a deep sense of purpose, one that would continue to guide him for years to come. As Ethan's initiatives expanded, his commitment to uplifting others reached new heights. He traveled frequently, visiting towns and cities where the Foundation's programs were making an impact. Each visit brought new stories of resilience and hope, fueling his desire to do more. One such journey took him to a rural community grappling with widespread unemployment. The town had once thrived on agriculture, but years of economic hardship had left many families struggling to make ends meet. Ethan organized a meeting with local leaders to discuss potential solutions. "We need something sustainable," Ethan explained, his tone earnest. "A program that taps into the skills and resources you already have here." The discussion led to the creation of the Community Harvest Initiative. The program provided residents with training in modern farming techniques, grants for starting small-scale agricultural businesses, and a platform to sell their produce at regional markets. Months later, Ethan returned to the town for the grand opening of its first cooperative market. The air buzzed with excitement as vendors set up stalls brimming with fresh fruits, vegetables, and handmade goods. A middle-aged woman named Rosa approached Ethan with a basket of tomatoes. "These are from my farm," she said, her voice brimming with pride. "I never thought I'd be able to provide for my family again, but now I can." "Thank you," Ethan shook her hand, humbled by her gratitude. "This is your victory, Rosa. You believed in yourself and made it happen." The cooperative market became a symbol of the town's resilience, inspiring neighboring communities to adopt similar initiatives. Ethan's efforts to revive the rural economy were hailed as a model for grassroots development. Meanwhile, Bridges of Hope continued to flourish, with new chapters opening in cities across the country. Ethan made it a point to attend their launch events, where he often met young people whose lives had been transformed by the program. At one such event, Ethan encountered a teenage boy named Marcus. Quiet and reserved, Marcus had been paired with a mentor through Bridges of Hope after struggling with self-esteem issues. "My mentor helped me see that I'm more than my mistakes," Marcus said, his voice trembling with emotion. "I've started to believe in myself again, and for the first time, I'm excited about the future." Ethan placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "You're capable of incredible things, Marcus. Keep pushing forward, and you'll achieve more than you ever imagined." Marcus's words stayed with Ethan long after the event. They reminded him of the power of mentorship and the importance of giving young people a sense of hope and belonging. As the foundation grew, so did Ethan's team. He brought on experts in education, social work, and community development to ensure that the programs were as effective as possible. He also established a network of alumni who volunteered as mentors and ambassadors, sharing their stories to inspire others. One of these alumni was Clara, the young woman who had mentored Mia. Clara had gone on to become a leader in her community, launching her own nonprofit to support at-risk youth. During a foundation gala, Clara approached Ethan with a wide smile. "I wouldn't be here if it weren't for you," she said. Ethan shook his head. No, Clara. You're the one who did the hard work. I just gave you a platform to shine. Clara laughed. Well, either way, I'm grateful. And I want you to know that I'm committed to paying it forward. As the night went on, Ethan reflected on how much the foundation had achieved. But he knew there was still more work to be done. One day, Ethan received a call from the mayor of a neighboring city. The city had been struggling with homelessness, and the mayor wanted to partner with the foundation to develop a comprehensive solution. Ethan assembled a team to assess the situation and identify key areas of need. They worked tirelessly to design a program that combined transitional housing, job training, and mental health support. The program, called Second Chance Housing, was launched a year later. It provided a safe haven for individuals and families while equipping them with the tools they needed to rebuild their lives. At the program's one-year anniversary, Ethan met a man named Tom, who had been one of its first residents. I was lost before I came here, Tom admitted, his voice thick with emotion. But now I have a job, a place to call home, and a renewed sense of purpose. I can't thank you enough. Ethan's eyes filled with tears as he shook Tom's hand. Hearing your story is all the thanks I need. You've reminded me why we do this work. Second Chance Housing became a cornerstone of the Foundation's mission, proving that with the right support, anyone could overcome adversity. As the years went by, Ethan's impact continued to ripple outward. He became a sought-after speaker, sharing his journey of transformation at conferences and events. His story inspired countless individuals to challenge their own biases and take action to create a more equitable world. Despite his busy schedule, Ethan never lost sight of the relationships that had shaped him. He remained close to the Harrisons, often seeking their guidance and wisdom. One evening, Ethan joined the Harrisons for dinner at their home. As they reminisced about the Foundation's early days, Michael raised a toast. To Ethan, he said, his voice filled with pride. You've shown us all the power of redemption and the impact one person can have when they choose to lead with compassion. Ethan's eyes glistened with emotion as he clinked glasses with the family. To the Harrisons, he replied. You taught me that it's never too late to change, and for that, I'll always be grateful. As Ethan reflected on Michael's words, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Yet he knew his journey was far from over. There were always more lives to touch and challenges to overcome. The work was endless, but it was a source of endless meaning. The Foundation's reach expanded internationally, bringing Ethan face-to-face with diverse cultures and new perspectives. In a small village in Central America, Ethan worked with a group of women artisans who handcrafted textiles. Their craft was their livelihood, but they lacked access to fair markets. Ethan partnered with local organizations to create an artisan cooperative. By connecting these women to buyers worldwide, the initiative transformed the village economy. Ethan spent days with them, listening to their stories, learning their techniques, and witnessing their pride as they showcased their work. One artisan, Maria, gifted Ethan a beautifully woven shawl. This represents hope, she said, her voice steady with emotion. Your efforts have brought hope to our families. Ethan ran his fingers over the intricate patterns, humbled by the gesture. The hope was already here, he replied. I just helped you share it with the world. As he returned home from that trip, Ethan realized the scope of his mission had grown beyond what he ever envisioned. It wasn't just about providing help. It was about empowering people to realize their own potential and value. Back in the United States, Ethan faced a new challenge. A series of natural disasters had displaced thousands of families across the Midwest. Determined to help, Ethan mobilized the foundation to launch emergency relief efforts. He personally visited shelters, distributing supplies and listening to the stories of those affected. At one shelter, he met a young girl named Lily, who clung tightly to a tattered stuffed bear. Is that your best friend? Ethan asked gently, kneeling to her level. Lily nodded, her big eyes filled with a mix of fear and hope. He's the only thing I saved. Ethan's heart ached. He handed her a small notebook and crayons from his bag. How about you draw some adventures for him? Maybe he can tell you all about them later." Lily's face lit up, and for a moment, the weight of her situation seemed lighter. It was moments like these that reminded Ethan of the human spirit's resilience and the importance of his work. The Foundation's disaster relief program evolved into a permanent division, equipped to respond quickly to crises nationwide. It became another symbol of how Ethan's transformation had birthed an organization rooted in compassion and action. As the years passed, Ethan began mentoring the next generation of leaders within the Foundation. He saw in them the same passion and drive that had been ignited in him. Among them was a young woman named Alana, who had been a beneficiary of the Bridges of Hope program years earlier. Alana was now a dynamic leader, spearheading initiatives to address systemic inequities in education. During a strategy meeting, she turned to Ethan and said, "None of this would have been possible without you believing in me back then." Ethan smiled warmly. "You had it in you all along, Alana. I just gave you a nudge." Alana's work reinvigorated Ethan's belief in the power of mentorship. He decided to create a formal mentorship network within the Foundation, connecting accomplished alumni with those just starting on their journeys. One of his proudest moments came during the network's first summit, where mentors and mentees shared their experiences. The room buzzed with energy as stories of triumph and transformation were exchanged. Ethan took the stage to address the group. "Each of you carries a spark that can ignite change," he said. "Your stories matter. Your actions matter. Together, we're building a legacy of hope and possibility." Applause filled the room, and Ethan felt a deep sense of pride. The Foundation had become a force for good, not because of one person, but because of a collective commitment to making the world a better place. One quiet evening, Ethan sat alone in his study, surrounded by photographs and mementos from his journey. A framed photo of the Harrison family caught his eye. He picked it up, running his fingers over the glass. Their unwavering kindness had set him on this path, and their lessons had stayed with him every step of the way. He knew that his success wasn't his alone. It was a testament to the power of forgiveness and the belief that people can change. As he gazed at the photo, he made a silent promise to carry their legacy forward, ensuring that the Foundation continued to thrive long after his time. Would you like the story to focus further on Ethan's personal growth, the Foundation's expansion, or challenges he might face as his journey progresses? Ethan's journey deepened as the Foundation expanded into more complex and challenging projects. With each new initiative, he felt a renewed sense of purpose, but also the weight of responsibility. He often reflected on the countless people whose lives were now intertwined with the work he had dedicated himself to. One day, during a meeting with the board of directors, Sarah Harrison presented an idea that resonated deeply with Ethan. "We should create a scholarship fund specifically for underserved communities," she said. "But it won't just be about academics. It should include mentorship, internships, and emotional support." Ethan leaned forward, his interest piqued. "I love this idea," he said. "But let's take it a step further. Let's make it a leadership pipeline. We can help these young people not only succeed, but also become change-makers in their own right." The board unanimously approved the initiative, which they named the Pathways to Leadership program. Ethan threw himself into its development, personally visiting schools and community centers to recruit participants. He knew that meeting the students face-to-face would make the program more meaningful. One afternoon, he visited a high school in a struggling neighborhood. The auditorium was filled with skeptical but curious students. Ethan stepped up to the microphone and spoke from the heart. "I know what it's like to feel overlooked," he began. "I know what it's like to think that your circumstances define you. But let me tell you something. Your circumstances do not limit your potential. You have the power to achieve incredible things, and we want to help you get there." As Ethan continued, the students' expressions softened, and by the end, they erupted in applause. Several approached him afterward, eager to learn more about the program. One of them, a boy named Jamal, caught Ethan's attention. Jamal was quiet but had a spark in his eyes that spoke of untapped potential. "Jamal," Ethan said, pulling him aside. "What's your dream?" Jamal hesitated before answering. "I want to be an engineer, but I don't think I can afford college." Ethan smiled warmly. "We'll help you get there. But remember, you have to believe in yourself first." Jamal became one of the first recipients of the Pathways to Leadership Scholarship. Over the years, he excelled academically and eventually interned with a prestigious engineering firm. When Jamal graduated and secured his dream job, he returned to mentor the next generation of students in the program. The impact of the scholarship fund rippled across communities, transforming countless lives. Ethan often attended the program's graduation ceremonies, moved by the stories of resilience and achievement. Each graduate reminded him why the work mattered so much. Despite the foundation's many successes, Ethan knew that challenges were inevitable. One such challenge arose when a corporate donor expressed interest in sponsoring a major project, but attached strings that conflicted with the foundation's values. During a tense meeting with the donor's representatives, Ethan stood firm. "We're grateful for your interest," he said, "but we cannot compromise our principles. Our mission is rooted in integrity, and we won't waver from that." The donor withdrew their offer, but the board supported Ethan's decision. His commitment to the foundation's values inspired a wave of public support, and new donors stepped in to fill the gap. The incident reinforced Ethan's belief that staying true to one's mission was essential, even in the face of adversity. As time passed, Ethan began to think about the future of the foundation. He wanted to ensure its legacy would endure long after he was gone. During a retreat with the board and key staff, he proposed a bold idea: creating an endowment fund to secure the foundation's sustainability. Michael Harrison, now retired but still deeply involved, smiled proudly. "You're thinking long-term, Ethan. That's exactly what we need." The endowment campaign launched with overwhelming success. Community members, former beneficiaries, and donors came together to contribute, each recognizing the foundation's profound impact. Ethan was touched by their generosity, knowing it was a testament to the trust the foundation had built. One evening, after a particularly successful fundraiser, Ethan found himself walking through the city streets. He passed a park where families were laughing, playing, and enjoying the fresh air. He paused to take it all in, feeling an overwhelming sense of gratitude. A woman approached him, holding a toddler by the hand. "Mr. Stone?" she said, her voice filled with emotion. "I just wanted to thank you. My daughter and I wouldn't be here today if it weren't for your foundation." Ethan crouched down to the child's level and smiled. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lila," the little girl said shyly. "Well, Lila," Ethan said gently, "you're the reason we do what we do." As the mother and child walked away, Ethan realized that moments like these were the true measure of his life's work. It wasn't about recognition or accolades. It was about the lives touched and the futures transformed.